Now, Australian Fashion Week is 2 weeks away, with international buyers and media getting ready to check out the designs of 2018. And among them is our fashion expert writer, Patty Huntington. Patty, welcome.
Hi. I'm not actually on the runway.
No, I know.
I'm in the audience.
You'll be off the runway. You'll be...
That's right.
Checking it out.
In the apron, is that what it's called?
In the trenches.
Shall I continue?
Okay, what are you looking forward to?
Well, it's the 22nd annual edition, and there's a lot on. There's over 50 designers, lots of new faces, and some old faces too. Sass and Bide hasn't been there sort of for 14 years. They're coming back.
Why? Why haven't they been there?
Well,
Why are they
they've
coming
been
back?
focusing on international runways,
markets, yeah.
and then of course the two founders sold the label to Maya. So now it's actually a Maya. It's a retail label that's showing on Australian on the runway here. And look, last year, I'm not sure if you remember, we had Oscar de la Renta and Cynthia Rowley coming. A big deal was made of both of those, and look, I personally think that was great for the event because it helped sort of raise the bar. But there was quite a lot of controversy over Oscar de la Renta closing the event and not an Australian. Partly because it wasn't an Australian brand, and partly because it wasn't actually, following the resort wear brief, which was the new mission of sort of Australian Fashion Week. And so that now they have Romance Was Born, which is an Australian brand. So look, after they changed the focus from spring summer to resort, now resort wear, just to clarify for people because it's a bit confusing, resort wear is what's called a pre-collection. You've got the spring summer collections, and then before that you've got the resort wear collections, which traditionally was for wealthy people to buy to wear on cruises around the world.
The Mediterranean.
But
Is that upscale leisure wear?
Yeah, but it can include just basic leisure wear as well. I mean, swimwear and activewear, in fact, as it does. But now it's actually an even bigger season. So they moved the event back to be at the beginning of this season, and they had a 75% increase in buyers, and it was very successful. So that's what that moving forward, that's going to be the focus.
You mentioned activewear there. Years ago, we would not have seen or even really been speaking about activewear, but now it plays a really big part of Fashion Week.
I mean, Andrew loves activewear. We've talked about.
But you look at the
see it everywhere.
You look at the sales of activewear. It's one of the largest growing retail sectors for women.
It is, incredibly, and because it's it bridges active clothing and casual clothing, and women are wearing sort of leggings that
Is that because women can't bother getting changed?
There is a perception that you might have given up if you're still in your activewear at school pickup.
Or perhaps they were at
You've
yoga.
been to the gym, go to school pickup, and just.
Or you had
stay
all
the same.
intentions to go to the gym in the morning and you never made it.
But it's good that people are more active. But absolutely, it is an incredible sort of growth code. So we've got sort of an activewear show, we've got a swimwear show, and it is a new category that's just expanding sort of all the time.
Are there any big names like your Oscar de la Rentas for this year?
Well, we have big Australian names. Dion Lee, who is one of Australia's best known fashion exports, and he's showing at New York Fashion Week regularly. We're talking about some of the bigger names, Alice McCall, Sass and Bide I mentioned, and we have some, obviously, lots of new faces as well.
We've actually seen vision, though, of some indigenous wear, aren't we?
Yes, this is from a previous Fashion Week, and look, that's a big question.
About why they don't feature more prominently.
Well, in the past 22 years, we have had indigenous brands such as Desert Designs, which we're looking at the moment. That was from 3 years ago. We've had Kui swimwear, few and far between. What there hasn't ever been is an indigenous fashion showcase, which I personally think there should be. New Zealand Fashion Week has an indigenous, a Maori showcase, but they also have a Maori fashion board called Miriam. Now, we don't have that in Australia. 3 years ago, I'm not sure if you recall, there was Australian Indigenous Fashion Week, which was really one day of shows, seminars, a trade show at the town hall. It got a huge amount of publicity. They did a lot of mentoring with designers and models, but unfortunately they collapsed under $400,000 debts, and it was never repeated. But one of the designers that actually was sort of discovered and nurtured for that, Grace Lillian Lee, who's based in Cairns, that sort of launched her career. Now she does these beautiful woven necklaces using traditional sort of weaving techniques, and she's been mentoring sort of artists and community sort of around Australia, and she also curates performances at things like the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair and the Melbourne Fashion Festival and the Adelaide Fashion Festival. What would be great would be to see, I think, some kind of group showcase at Australian Fashion Week. I think the difference...
As in looking at the international market.
Absolutely, yes, because I mean these artists. I mean, there's just so many of them, and they're in artist collectives across Australia. Some of their work is being licensed through the appropriate channels, but there is such huge scope there. And look, when you've got emerging designers, we talk about emerging designers all the time. Normally, they're based in sort of metropolises, but these are emerging designers in remote communities who need a lot of assistance. So I think there needs to be a national strategy, some kind of indigenous Australian fashion board like Miriam in New Zealand, and then sort of help and mentoring and business advice for these artists and designers.
Okay, Australia is going to be a guest nation overseas in Italy at the Pitti Uomo. For those of us who don't know the Pitti Uomo show, it is one of the most influential male brand shows in the world.
It's the biggest and in fact the most prestigious
I should take note.
menswear trade show, and we have some footage of it. The men really dress up. I mean, they've been referred to as Pitti peacocks, guys just dressed in this is an Australian brand, Double Rainbow, that's showing there. But
Leisurewear.
Leisurewear, no, well, exactly. This is one of the new emerging Australian designer brands that has actually sort of reinterpreted Australian surfwear. It's an historic showcase. There's 7 Australian designers that have been invited as the guest nation at Pitti Uomo, and it's supported by Woolmark, so they're using Australian wool in their collections. And I think it's reflecting also the growth in menswear. Menswear has been very strong all over the world. In fact, the growth has been outpacing women's wear. In Australia, I think menswear online sales sort of grew 13% over the past 5 years. A lot of, in spite of the difficult trading conditions, a lot of bricks and mortar retailers went into online sales. And of course, the internet has really opened up opportunities for men. I mean, before men used to shop with a purpose if they were going to a wedding or something, but now, they can check stuff out online.
Well, getting off the rack suits, and that was pretty much it, really. But now, I guess, as you say, there's a huge scope to choose from.
Just overnight, after sort of talking about this on social media, this segment, I had a designer, Michael Azzolini, who used to do women's swimwear. He's now just about to launch men's swimwear called Azzo, which is a great Australian sort of Australia brand name. Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of opportunity in the menswear, and at Australian Fashion Week next month, there's I think at least 5 menswear shows, including a show by an international male supermodel called Garrett Neff, who has a brand called Katama. So that's one of the very few international names that's coming out.
There are some great off-runway venues that are being showcased for Fashion Week as well, aren't there?
Yeah, well, each season we sort of see iconic locations around the harbour, like the Sydney Opera House, under the Harbour Bridge. I mean, last year Camilla actually took a boat of buyers and media out on the harbour. I mean, they're sort of keeping that under wraps at the moment, but there will be a number of them in around the harbour, in Bondi. The Boyd Charlton Pool is one of them. So, I mean, it's fantastic for the internationals who come out to sort of see this.
Is it always Sydney?
Is it always Sydney?
Yeah.
The event?
Yeah.
Yes, it has always been Sydney.
Why is that? Given that Melbourne's actually the fashion capital.
Well, that's...
Or was that disputed? Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Melbourne has the Melbourne Fashion Festival, which is a consumer, and in fact, in terms of size, it's a much bigger event, but in terms of actually the wholesale showcase, it's Sydney. They did try to do an autumn-winter version in Melbourne at one point, but it just never got off the ground. So they've sort of stuck to their knitting, which is swimwear, activewear, resort wear. We've got 23 beaches in Sydney. And look, this is where most of the media is based. It's a good point. I mean, whether it's an additional cost to sort of take it around the country, you'd like to see it in other states.
No, you've just offended Melbourne viewers, but that's fine.
Or share the love. Who knows, it might one day happen. I'm afraid we are out of time, but Patty will no doubt catch up with you after Fashion Week to get your wash up of it all. Patty Huntington, many thanks.
My pleasure.